Welcome, listeners, to the next episode of the British Eventing Show. The countdown is officially on because Paris is on the horizon and Olympic fever, I think, has caught us all. Rosie Williams is with me. Rosie, first of all, how is life at British Eventing? We are halfway through the season, which was absolutely mad to say. How is everything going?
Hello, Nicole. Very well, thank you. Good. It's good. We're halfway through the season. The sun is shining, which is just amazing. We're getting lots more people on their horses, which is fab. There's obviously the challenges that we had at beginning of the season where people didn't get enough runs and all those sorts of things. But in the background, we're working with the organisers and the fixtures to see what we can fix for 2025 calendar to see how we can make it more user-friendly and flexible. And also move some events around so that we can try and avoid ground that doesn't cope with that very wet spring that we know. And look, there's lots of fun people getting out on their horses. We've got events that are having to ballot, which is great. We've got other events that have seen, really good entries. Now, the cynics say that that's because there hasn't been enough runs, but I truly believe that that's because our organisers and our riders really want to get out and do their cross country and do their eventing. So it was brilliant. And I was at Farley Hall last weekend, and what a great venue that is. Really kind, lovely people, and yeah, it's all good. It's very positive, which is great.
That is brilliant to hear. It's always interesting, isn't it? When we've had a particularly wet, miserable spring, actually, it isn't always very enticing for people to get out and kind of get on top of their fitness work and to get their prep work in at home. And sometimes I think that pushes kind of people back in where they would normally be in their season, just because there's this thing called life. And we're all humans. And actually that needs to be we need to bear that in mind as well.
Yeah, and look, I think the abandonment fund has helped. Little Downham, great example. They had some struggles with the car park, with the lorry park. So we invested in, we shared some investment with Tina from Little Downham to get some tracking down, which actually meant that the event wasn't going to be cancelled because the lorry park wasn't available. And that's where they got too late on Friday afternoon. So we threw the tracking down and everything went ahead, which is great. That just means that people we're not stopping eventing because of things that we can't control.
This show isn't about the abandonment fund, listeners, but seeing as you just mentioned it there, Rosie, I just wanted to ask you, obviously we have had quite a few abandonments with the weather at the start of this year. How is the abandonment fund looking? Because I appreciate that obviously, the more events that are cancelled, the more money gets used. So how is that looking at the moment, and what do we expect for the rest of the year?
So total transparency, I spoke to Alison, who's in the office today. The abandonment fund is back up at 37,000-ish positive. So we're not back at the 75 that we put in at the start, but we think that over the next sort of 3 months and the rest of the season, we'll be able to put that back to minimum of where we started with the 75 grand. So I think it's helping. I think it's helping with the confidence of people being able to enter. It's not perfect, but I think everybody is winning a little bit out of it.
That's fantastic to hear. And thank you for being so honest with this, because actually I think that's a really important point to look at it and kind of actually be really clear with what's there and what it's being used for and everything else. One of the other things that has kind of been introduced this year, and I know when we last spoke a couple of months ago, this had recently been launched and had a good amount of responses so far, but the feedback from all of the stakeholders going to events, just quickly, how's that going?
I love it. It's my Monday morning pleasure. Some of it, we're up to about between 1,600 and 1,700 different pieces of feedback from individuals. So that means 1,100 people have actually bothered to get on and tell us what went right and what went wrong at the events. There's some really great stuff coming through, things like I loved the coffee, but the ground wasn't very good, or that fence was a problem. And actually, when you go and overlay, when you have sort of 20 or 30 people from the same event saying fence 5 wasn't very good, or the landing was poor, then when you go and overlay things like the stewards' reports and the TA's reports, and you go, oh yeah, Fence 5 wasn't very good. So actually we can go to the organisers and say, what are we going to do? What can we do about Fence 5 for next year to make sure that they're really proactive? I mean, there's been some really funny things come through. There was a person who brought up that there wasn't enough toilet paper at Kirramua. But when I sent that to the organisers at Kirramua, they said that that was because somebody stole the box of about 500 toilet rolls and they didn't have enough. So some of it's great. And the organisers are really taking it as it's meant to be, in terms of it's a positive thing to know what people want and what they don't need. So it's great.
It's good to actually point out that while it can obviously be used for constructive things that we can improve for the future at different events, but actually things that work as well, people can also feed back on that. So positive things, because I often think that people are very quick to say when something isn't right, and that's kind of what encourages us to sometimes speak up. But actually, we can just as easily speak up to say the positives as well.
And actually, the vast majority of the feedback that we're receiving is actually positive. It's what a great event. The organisers were wonderful. The volunteers were fantastic. I fell off and somebody helped me. All of those really lovely positive stories that we'll share as we go through the year.
Okay, let's talk about the next few weeks because Olympic fever, I think, is catching us all. First of all, reaction from you on the British team. I know that I don't think I've ever seen a year where there has been so much anticipation from people looking, watching, waiting, refreshing to find out who is going to make that squad, because it's a tough old squad to get into.
Well, I think British eventing is in a wonderful position, or any sport is in a wonderful position, when you could take two teams and still hope to get a medal with both. And I think that is credit to our riders, to the efforts that they make through the year, to our owners and all the people that support our riders. And I would not want to have been a selector. No way. It's very, very tough to be a selector. But I think, I'm not an expert, but they all look really good to me. And all I can really do now is get behind them and hope and wish and pray and tell them I love them and make sure that they've got everything that they need to go from, the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks. The preparations for things like the Olympics, they've started 10 years ago. These guys aren't, this isn't a new thing. There's not something that they weren't prepared for. But, the stuff around them that the BEF are able to put in place with the help of the lottery and all that sort of stuff. I mean, we're in a fabulous position to go over to Paris and bring back some medals.
We absolutely are. For anybody who isn't aware of the team, I'm just going to run through it very quickly for you. So Ros Cantor, Lordship Scrafalo, of course, the reigning European champions, badminton winners from last year. They are in the squad. Lordship Scrafalo, owned by Michelle and Archie Saul. Sarah Charnley, who's been on the show plenty of times before, she's absolutely brilliant, will be grooming for Ros out in Paris. Laura Collett and her own Karen Bartlett and Keith Scott's London 52. Dan the Man is back, listeners. Tilly Hughes, who's been Laura's head girl for a few years, will be grooming for Laura. Yasmin Ingham, the reigning world champion with Banzai de Loire, owned by the Sue Davis Fund and Jeanette Chin. Alison Bell will be supporting Yaz and her team out in Paris. And then Tom McEwen with James and Joe Lambert and Deirdre Johnson's JL Dublin. Adam Short, who again has been on the show, brilliant supporter of all things eventing, Adam, and he will be out with Tom in Paris. So 4 massive names. There is obviously going to be huge disappointment because we have such a wealth of talent. We're not going to go into kind of discussing the selection here, but Rosie, I just want to kind of pick with you the build up now to Paris, because we are weeks away from an Olympic Games. Paris is pretty close to us, really. As far as Olympics go, it's as close as it's going to get outside of Great Britain. How important is it for the British eventing community to now pull together to support the team at the Games?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. And I don't think anybody should ever underestimate how a particular note or a colouring drawing or a photo or a post on social media or something does really have a positive effect on athletes. And it's not just the athletes, it's the people around them, the owners and the grooms and all the people that are out there supporting them. And then we've just got to show the power. It's about there's only 4 riders and horses, but we've got thousands of eventing community here that we can really get in behind them and prove to the world that 1, Britain is great at eventing, but 2, Britain has a really great culture and is incredibly supportive of each other and the community, supporting the events and the sport that we love. It's only Paris, so if we've been reminding people that tickets are still, there are some tickets that keep coming on and off in terms of where they're selling, but they're doing that in a really odd way, but that's typically Olympics. But it's really important that we've got a high visibility on our social media channels. It's really important that people sit and watch it. It's really important that people listen to the radio and all that sort of stuff, because no matter how we all love the Olympics is a really big business, and to stay relevant to the Olympics, we have to prove that we have people that are really are wanting to watch and be involved in the games. And that goes for every sport. So, I'm a sports tragic, so I'll be watching everything I can. I'm really lucky to be able to go to the Olympics. So I'll be out there in Paris for the eventing part. And then when I get back, I'll be working from home in front of the telly watching everything else. So I think it's really key that everybody gets behind the team. And, we're going to have a great little campaign that I'm sure you can talk about.
Talk to us about it, because Be With Us. I think this is about sort of harnessing the power of the eventing community to get behind the athletes, specifically the British eventing athletes, but also, of course, the wider equestrian team as well. So Be With Us in Paris. What is it? How can people get involved?
So, well, it'll be being announced as part of, just after this podcast, I think. So a lot of detail will be available through the websites and through socials. It's about showing, it's about getting onto all of our different channels and portals and places and showing the team and showing the world how much we really care. And we are really behind our athletes and all the people that are involved. And it's not, yes, it's a Be With Us. It's an eventing. This is our eventing one, but we're also all horsey people, so we'll be following the dressage riders and the show jumpers as well, and as they'll be following us. So I think it's a real team effort that we can prove to the world that Britain loves its equestrian sports.
Rosie, what's your message to the team for Paris?
It's, that's a really tough question, because I'd like to say winning is the only thing, but that's not fair. And I think if the athletes come home and in their heart of hearts they've tried their very best and things have gone well or things have gone badly, then that's all we can ask as a nation.
Watch this space. We all know with horses, there is rarely plain sailing, but one thing is for certain, no stone will be left unturned. Rosie, we're going to catch up with you pre-Paris as well. We cannot wait to kind of see behind the scenes, possibly a little bit as well. But for now, thank you very much. Best of luck over the next few weeks. And listeners, we have got a really special treat for you, because we've got two other very special guests on this show. Performance manager for Team GB, Richard Waygood, will be coming later on in the show. But first of all, we wanted to give you a real insight into what it is like to actually build up the games. And from a team equestrian perspective, there is no better person to give us that insight than performance director for the British Equestrian Federation, Helen Nicholls. Should also note that actually, listeners, we caught up with Helen before selection was announced. We've all been waiting with bated breath. So this was recorded a few days ago. One lady who has a very important few weeks coming up is Performance Director of British Equestrian, Helen Nicholls. Helen, it is lovely to have you with us, fresh back off a flight from Rotterdam. Lots going on at the moment. I'm going to start, though, with saying the Olympics. Just how important are they as a whole?
Great question. They're really important. And I think they're not just important for the 12 athletes who ultimately compete at the games. They're important for everybody involved in equestrian and actually everybody involved in sport. It's the one time a year in a cycle that everybody switches their TV on and wants to watch events that they don't normally watch. And it's the moment where the brilliance of the equestrian events reach out to everybody. Your next door neighbours that don't normally watch, they watch them. And I think the thing for me that sort of brings that home is, I don't know if you remember from London 2012 with the golden post boxes. Everybody wanted a golden post box in their village. And why did they want a golden post box in their village? They wanted it because they were proud. And so you go around these villages and there's these post boxes, and some of them, quite a lot of them are equestrian athletes. So, Peter Charles, Charlotte Desjardins, Carl Hester, they have golden post boxes in their village, which people in their village are incredibly proud about because it's an Olympic medal. That doesn't happen when they come home from the World Championships or the European Championships or a Grand Prix or having won in badminton or Aachen or whatever. It just doesn't get that recognition. So for me, that always reminds me how much it matters to how many people.
It's a great opportunity, isn't it? We all know and love not just eventing, but all of the equestrian disciplines. However, it's our chance to showcase those sports and to kind of make other people who wouldn't necessarily be fans of the sports already fall in love with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think, the visual spectacular of equestrian events, whether it's jumping, dressage, eventing, you just cannot be anything other than enthralled when you watch it. It's it is magical. And then you come to the competition end of it when it gets really tight and who's going to actually win the medal. That is it's some of the best TV. And I think time and time again, the IOC will tell you that the viewing figures for equestrian are right up there, really right up there, which is something I think in this sport we should all be really proud of that.
And actually, it's always very topical, isn't it? Eventing in particular, in terms of its future in the Olympic Games, and actually being able to showcase it on a world stage, in my mind, is so unbelievably important to a non-equestrian sort of audience. I have to ask though, performance director, obviously the world-class programs across all of the different disciplines come under your kind of banner and the teams that are within them. The Olympics are not just a huge sporting accolade and the pride and the pleasure that comes with doing well at the Olympic Games. There's a massive financial pressure in terms of the success of this Games then has a real knock-on effect for future games. Just give us an insight into how that works and what is riding on it from a performance perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because from the outside, that can be the perspective that, it's financially a huge consequence of doing well or not doing well at the Games. But actually, that's not what we worry about, because if we worry about that, that's how you get it wrong. So for us, that's just a byproduct of what we do. Our actual job is to give athletes the platform and the support that they need to be able to succeed and not worry about anything else. That's our role. That's why we go to work every day, to try and make sure we do every single bit in every single area that gives the athletes the best possible opportunity of fulfilling their potential at the Games. And whether that's in nutrition, whether it's in coaching, whether it's in veterinary support, whatever it's in, whether it's in operations and logistics, that's our job. Of course, it has a financial implication whether you do well or you don't. But I think one of the brilliant things about the British system and something that came in since 96 is the stability. So all the funding is on a 4-year cycle. And I think we're the only country in the world that has that 4-year cycle funding. Most of the other nations are funded on an annual or a biannual funding cycle, which does make it, exactly as to your question, it has financial implications whether you do well or not at the Games, and it gives you this real instability in quite short term. And if you look to the worst example of that, you look at football, don't you, where it's, they have to plan for the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks. They can never plan long term because of the financial implications. And I think the system we have in the UK allows us to plan and strategically plan properly over cycles. So I think we're really fortunate actually with that. And a funding body like UK Sport that understands and works with you, that in sport, you shouldn't be able to predict the outcome. And that's the magic of sport. If you knew what the outcome was before you went into the competition, it wouldn't be exciting and it wouldn't be fantastic. So that's the world we live in. That's the game we play.
I love that insight, actually, because you're completely right. Actually, if you go into a fence thinking, God, I really hope we get the right stride. I really hope we get the right stride. Oh, am I going to get the right stride? You're going to get the wrong one. It's guaranteed, pretty much. So actually looking at it from that perspective, it is, I'm sure, the secret to a lot of the success. And you're right in saying 4 years is a hell of a lot more stable than a year or 2 yearly cycle. But do you have targets, Helen, in terms of this year? I feel like equestrian sports, our expectations as the audience, we've been fortunate to have a lot of success, and everybody sort of has that expectation. So what is the goal for Paris? Can I ask you that? Is that putting you on the spot?
No, not at all. Of course you can. For us, our actual goal is to try and go into every single discipline, every single event with medal shots. That's the aim, and we would be negligent in our duties if we didn't try to do that. So we try and enter every event, whether it's eventing team, eventing individual, dressage team, with a medal shot. And then what you're actually talking about in terms of your targets is what your medal conversion is. And that's the important bit, because anyone can go in with 6 medal shots, but the likelihood of you converting all 6 is relatively low. That'd be 100% medal conversion. And I don't think I know a sport that's achieved that yet. If you just look back at the track record of equestrian, historically transferred between about 50 and 75%, which is way, way, way at the top of the leaderboard of British sports. So I think the only other sport that has a conversion rate similar to equestrian is cycling. And that's a really good place to be. And so for us, in answer to your question, we go in with what we hope are 6 genuine medal shots. And if we converted 50% of those, that would be 3 medals. And, that would be a huge achievement in sport, in elite sport. But every single athlete goes in there with the aim and the hope that they are going to convert. So, yeah.
I find that really interesting. And you are right, because actually how many 50 to 75% of a conversion rate, that's pretty good going. And I'm sure there'd be plenty of other sports that could only ever dream of that sort of target. Obviously, the road to Paris has been quite long. That we've been talking about Paris for quite a while. We have had a 3-year Olympic cycle. Has that made any difference, though, to what we would normally see in the build-up to a Games?
I don't think so. I think it's probably been a bit more intense. The major championships of the Europeans and the Worlds and the Europeans, it's relatively intense because of that shortened cycle. So I think it's probably more intense on sort of the operations and the planning time. 3 years to plan instead of 4 years to plan with all the operations and logistics just puts that little bit of extra pressure on. And in some ways it's good, isn't it, for us that it's an on-continent Games. We're not flying to Asia or to America, which brings it to added complications. We're getting in cars and going to Paris, so we're relatively lucky in that sense.
It also feels a lot more of the known sort of factors than when we look back to Tokyo 3 years ago. And yes, we had COVID to contend with as well, but there were so many more unknowns with the travelling of the horses and actually a different environment. And yes, there's a different equestrian facility in Versailles for Paris, but again, lots of the combinations that will have been going have all pretty much competed in France on a regular basis. So there is that kind of element of the known that is there. From a BEF perspective, what does the build up to Paris look like from you in a logistical point of view? I can imagine it's an unbelievably complex puzzle. Yeah,
it is. And I think it's quite scary when you look at some of the spreadsheets of movements and detail. But the reality is that the closer that you get to the Games, the sharper the focus becomes, and actually the easier the planning becomes. The hardest bit is the unknowns when, we haven't selected teams, we haven't selected staff, we haven't made decisions. That's the hardest bit because you're planning for, 8 different scenarios. But as you get closer and closer to the Games and athletes are selected, combinations are confirmed, and decisions are made, actually it becomes much easier then because you discard plan D, E, and F because you don't need that anymore, and you go to you get to the sharp end, and it becomes a bit more streamlined. So we're just in this week, we're starting to get towards that phase at the moment. So that all gets quite exciting then, because all of those months and months of planning become reality, and you can start to make some really good decisions with loads of information that you've got over the past year or so, and move towards the game confidently. There's always that sort of satisfaction, isn't there, when you see the plan come together and you can actually see it all kind of falling into place. Obviously, equestrian sports have something that lots of the other sports don't have, and that is half a ton of animal to take with them to an Olympic Games. So how does it work from organising all of those things like feed and equipment, obviously of which we need quite a lot? Yeah, no, absolutely. It is a logistical challenge, and it's a huge jigsaw of getting the right people in the right place and the right kit in the right place, etc. Whilst the athletes, they do this day in, day out. We're just on our way back from Rotterdam. They'll have come from another show, etc. These logistics are not unusual. However, the added complications of the games and the lack of control over some aspects of the operations, that's the bit that really makes it different. And the fact that you have backups for backups. So it does make it more complex. But I think one of the things I would say, and one of the things that I'm super, super confident in, is we have the world's best operations team in this. They're really, really experienced. They really know what to worry about and what not to worry about, which is a really important thing at an Olympic Games. And they leave no stone unturned in making sure that the athletes arrive and have the best platform in the world to perform from. So in terms of operations, that's one bit that we are really confident in.
There's a good bit of overlap between the disciplines this year. Eventing is the first. They get theirs done and dusted in the first 3 days, and then it's dressage and jumping, and they kind of overlap a little bit more. So how does it work in terms of the setup and making sure everything is ready? Because the stables and everything will all be prepared, is that right, before the horses arrive?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a team that go in before the horses arrive to make sure that when they arrive, everything is done to, the specifics of each combination that's coming in, and work with the groom in terms of what that looks like. So it's as smooth as possible. Interestingly, one of the changes for this year is that the organising committee are stabling nations by discipline, not by nation. So in the past, you would have had, a British area of the stables, a French area, an American area. This time, that's not the case. There'll be, because of, as you've described, the rollover of events and the overlap, there'll be an eventing area of the stables, then a dressage, and then jumping. So that's a bit different, and it puts more pressure on the logistics of getting that right. But as I said before, one of the things I'm really confident in is that when the grooms and the horses arrive, they will have a smooth entrance into the games, and the team will have made sure that everything is there ready for them to come in the most relaxing manner. That's the aim.
I love that. The kind of the team atmosphere around all of the stables. I think even for anybody seeing photos and things from home, you can almost feel that kind of Olympic spirit. Team equestrian, it's something that we see in the Olympics. Obviously, the equestrian disciplines kind of counted as one, essentially. Whereas, we used to have the World Equestrian Games where everybody competed at the same venue, but we don't have that so much anymore. And so it's a little bit of a different feeling. How important is it from a community spirit from, I guess, all of the disciplines to actually pull together as part of the Olympics as one?
Oh, it's really important. And I think it's really, really conducive to doing well as well. There's nothing to inspire and push you on, is there, than seeing your teammates be successful. My background is in sailing, and I always remember we had an athlete that went to, I think it was the Sydney Games, and they were one of only one or two athletes that came back without a medal, and how difficult that was for that athlete. When you're part of a really successful team and some people haven't been successful, crikey, it spurred them on to become successful in the future. And there's nothing like being surrounded by successful, good people that help you with that. And I think, the teams, when they're overlapping and they're seeing each other, they genuinely want each other to do as well as possible and support each other as well in good times and on bad days as well. So I think it is nice when they compete alongside each other, and it's a good challenge as well in terms of seeing the challenge of what each discipline brings to each athlete.
I always remember Tom McEwen was talking about being in Tokyo and the lack of the crowds. And he said, but actually it was much more intense because he had Charlotte Dujardin as one of the only people in the stands alongside Carl Hester watching his dressage test. He had Scott Brash watching his show jumping around. It was like, it was the most intense lesson I've ever had. Helen, of course, we've got the Olympics in Paris, but actually we shouldn't forget that the Paralympics are hot on their heels as well. And that's a discipline that actually we have had a lot of success in the past.
Oh, absolutely. The para team are getting ready to follow up when the Olympics finish, and they are hugely successful and really good ambitions for them in Paris as well. And it's good. We come back from the Olympics, we have a little break and we go back out with the paras and their competition again in Versailles. What a platform for them to compete in. It'll be an absolutely stunning finish to the summer. And I would just urge everybody. I think Channel 4 again are really, really bought into the Paralympics, and they're going to be broadcasting. So yeah, I really urge everybody to switch your channels over to Channel 4 at the end of August and September, and the Paras will be there competing for us, doing us proud.
Can I ask, for you personally, going into the games, what do they look like for you?
Yeah, so they sort of go in stages really for me, in that there's the pre-selection bit, which is really, really important. And, the whole part about pre-selection is we want to give every single athlete the opportunity to meet the selection criteria, do what they can to put selection into their hands as much as possible in the run-up to selection. That's really, really important. So that's part one. Part two is, selecting the teams and getting the teams prepped and ready to go. That's the sort of phase we're in at the moment. And then it goes to the nitty-gritty end, the actual delivery end, which we'll go into towards the end of July, the actual, making the decisions on the ground and delivering. And it's funny, my role, because if we go and everything is absolutely smooth and there's no problems at all, the games are quite quiet for me. But that never normally happens. There's normally some little things that keep you occupied. But it's like everything. All the planning should have been done beforehand. So for all of the athletes, our staff teams that are out there, whether that's equine support, human support, operational support, the PMs, myself, really the games is just about delivering what we know we're capable of delivering. And it's the planning work in the previous months and years that is the critical bit.
And by the time you get to the games, fingers crossed, everything is set out to see a successful and very competitive games at that as well. We've talked about kind of the support from the riders alongside each other out there, but how important is it for everybody at home to be with us throughout the games?
Oh, it means a huge amount to the athletes and the staff that they know that they've got people that have got their backs and are every waking hour of every waking day willing them on to do well. And it matters to them that what they do impacts other people. I think that's really, really important. And there's times when for elite athletes where they have to lock down, they have to shut everybody out, and they have to concentrate on what they're doing to be able to deliver the performance that they're capable of. But that doesn't mean that the outcome of what they achieve, they don't want that to impact other people and to have a positive ripple effect on the sport and other people as well. They hugely do. It hugely matters to them. And I think, we're going to do some things in Paris where I know our comms team we've got some colouring pictures for children and messaging that we would really like, riding schools and children to get involved with. And they'll be posted on the wall at breakfast when the athletes go in. There'll be an opportunity for any equestrian fans to send in some messages of support. And again, they will go on the screen and the rolling boards at breakfast and in the lobby area for the athletes. So when they come into breakfast, they just know that there's people there that want them to do well, that, look up to them and think that what they're doing has an impact on their young son or their young daughter, etc., or on themselves. And that does actually really matter. The fact that, you go not with just yourself and your team and your friends and family, but you go with a whole nation wanting to do well for you.
It's given me goosebumps even just thinking about it now, Helen. We have got such an exciting few weeks. Best of luck. Thank you for giving us a real insight into what it is like from your perspective, and wishing, of course, not just the eventing team, but also all of the other equestrian teams the very, very best of luck for Paris.
Thank you very much. That's very kind.
So finally, listeners, the man in charge of Team GB's eventing squad over the next few weeks, Chef to Keep, Dickie Waygood. Dickie, first of all, it is great to have you on the show. I appreciate you taking the time because it is a mad busy time of year for you. Let's kick things off with, I guess, first of all, the reaction of the team and everything that has gone into the selection over the last few weeks, because it is an unenviable task, I have to say.
It's been a bonkers few weeks. I mean, as you'll appreciate, athletes, combinations have been running around the world, chasing selection. And I did not and do not envy the selectors' role at all. It's a really, really difficult role. And this year, they're dividing the sort of top group of riders with tissue paper. It's incredible. And, obviously there's going to be some very disappointed combinations. And then there's going to be the ones that are selected and are going to be extremely happy. So I feel for those that haven't been selected, because we genuinely could have sent 2 teams that could have all, you would have put an each way bet on which one would beat the other team, and also they'd all be capable of being on the podium. So it really has been difficult for the selectors this year, but they've made their decision, and we've got a really good group of people. And whichever way we looked, we would have had a great group of people. So that's where we're at. And now it's time to buckle down and put that final preparation into the horses.
So what does the next few weeks look like? First of all, let's talk about yesterday, as we're recording this, was the announcement of the team and kitting out day. What does that involve? And then maybe you could just talk us through actually what goes on behind the scenes over the next few weeks.
So yesterday, really exciting day, hosted by the BOA and the team kit suppliers. We go to the NEC in Birmingham, and great. I mean, a lot of the sponsors of Team GB are there as well, as they're there as volunteers to see you through the process. So you arrive, and then once you've logged in and you've registered, you have an introduction video, and then you work through this sort of process of changing rooms, and you get all of these different shorts, hoodies, me in a hoodie for God's sake, hoodies, your waterproof trousers, different trainers, and you check that all the sizes fit. And your first changing room, you'll probably have 30 items of clothes to try on. Once you've done that, they make any changes in clothes sizes, and then you move on to the next booth, and then to the next booth. And during that time as well, we did some anti-doping education. So that was human anti-doping. And then we rolled out of there. And all of that process would take about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. And then we rolled out of there, and then we went over to the National Motorcycle Museum, where we did our media announcement.
30 changes of clothes. That's like a workout in itself, to be quite honest.
It is, yeah. And it's athletes being athletes and the staff being staff, everybody highly motivated. Everybody's trying to race each other to see who can get out the booth first and have done their sort of clothing check first. So, you can't take that competitive spirit away from them.
No, not at all. Not at all. Right. So the next few weeks then, what is the plan in terms of is there team training? I know actually there is a selection. There is a run through of the dressage test at Aston Walls. Is that right? Next week?
Yeah, so that is part of our training, and that actually what we do is we have a day's training before. We'll go to Aston on Wednesday evening. And we're riding through the Olympic test, or some riders will ride part of the Olympic test, other than the movement. Some will ride the whole test from top to bottom. And the idea of that is to get into an arena obviously on a surface with a little bit of atmosphere, and to ride the test through in quick time. Because what tends to happen with that particular test, or I learned in my dressage days, when the Grand Prix in pure dressage was shortened, however many times the riders rode it at home, when they actually rode it on the field of play for the first 2 or 3 times, they found that it really came on them very, very quickly. So the idea is to make that test almost become normal, so they don't find it's a bit of a blur, and they've got time to think in there and obviously prepare the horses, etc. So a little bit of an atmosphere about that. It is a training session, it's not a testing session. And like I say, some might go and ride a couple of movements again. Some might ride the test from the top to bottom. Did a very similar thing before we went to Tokyo, and we did that at the Royal Windsor Horse Show. And we were lucky for us that when Windsor was put back because of COVID, moved into July. So we went to Windsor and we did a very similar thing that we're doing at Aston Walls.
So then do riders go back to their own bases and kind of just prepare, get their heads down and kind of do the finishing touches as they would normally, or have you got another team camp?
No, we've got, then we basically, once we finished at Aston, the riders then all had their individual training plans, which should be supported by either us, Chris and I, or by their home teams, their home coaches. So there'll be a plan then. And the idea is, as you know, because to get the horses to actually peak when we're on that first day of dressage in Paris. So we've got a little bit of a holding camp before we move into the Olympic venue. So we spend a couple of days outside of the venue in a facility that we've created a sort of pre-camp before we move in. And that will just be for the final sort of final touches. But to be honest with you, at this point, the technical skills, it really is the small stuff. And if you're trying to reinvent the wheel at the moment, then probably we wouldn't be in a great place.
So what does it look like in terms of the team being announced as a team of 3? Because actually the 4 athletes have been announced. We've got the team of 3 and there will be 1 reserve. Will there be anybody else in that holding camp pre-Paris? And when can we learn the 3 and the 4? Will that be very close?
You'll have to wait.
Dickie.
Yeah. You'll have to wait for that. We don't make those decisions until we need to, and the reason around that, and enough time for everyone to know, obviously, whether they're in or out. But fundamentally, the closer we can make that decision, the more information we get, and the more understanding of how the horses are, and the course, the design, all those little bits and pieces. So, we delay that decision until we have to make it.
And it has to be made, am I right in saying something like 2 hours before trot up?
Your final decision, that's you can actually make a change between the 3 and the 1, actually 2 hours before the start of the dressage, if you had to. But the last time you could bring a horse into the venue is 2 hours before the trot up.
Okay. So in that case, then obviously by then you will have a really good idea of the course and what the facility looks like, and the ground and the conditions and all of those additional factors. What can you tell us about Paris? Things that are public or that people might have missed that actually kind of set the scene as to what is in store?
Okay, so if you've not been to Versailles, I mean, the palace or the chateau is beautiful. And then the backdrop basically is a huge garden, which I want to say is about 2,000 acres. And
it's some garden, Dickie. Some garden.
Some garden, yeah. And in that garden is the what they call the canal, and that is a cross-shaped lake. And for those of you who have not seen any pictures, there's 2 pontoons across the lake where the horses gallop over the lake. The dressage will take place on the Saturday, and 65 tests in one day, shortened test, but at a higher level. So it's the same test as in Tokyo. It's an Olympic specific test. So this is why we're practicing the test at Aston Le Walls, because they don't get to ride this test anywhere else. So an Olympic test, about 4.5 minutes. And within that test, there's slightly more complicated moves. There's not a halt at the centre down the centre line, the first centre line, and that's to save a little bit of time. There's not as much walk in this test, but there are 4 flying changes, and also there's some zigzags in canter as well. So the whole test itself will come on the riders very quickly. I really enjoyed watching the test in Tokyo. And like I say, it was only 4.5 minutes. So it really held your attention from beginning to end. And then on the second day, cross country, and for Versailles in Paris, the track itself is 9 minutes, 18 seconds. And there's 42 jumping efforts altogether. So it's going to be a quick track. The ground conditions look pretty amazing. They've got plenty of water to put on if they want to. And the preparation of the ground, when we've been out for the test event, the ground itself, they mixed lots of sand in with the soil. So it looks pretty amazing. And the feedback on the ground from Mark Lucy when he's done his sort of his test of the ground conditions. He tested Versailles one day and then drove down to Harath-the-Pan the following day for the Europeans. They both had the same amount of rain, and we know the Europeans were very deep, but he said that the ground conditions in Versailles were much, much better. The soil held together better, and especially with the sand that they put in.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, so it's really good. There's 3 water jumps. And your first water jump is quite early. It looks like there's going to be a fountain in that water jump, but we're yet to see that. And then once you've obviously cross-country finished, really good cooling systems there, misting fans at the end of the course, misting fans back at the stables. But one of the challenges would be the pure volume of people on the cross-country day. So getting about is going to be quite difficult because you are in a park and it's going to be strings right up to the course. So getting accessibility to different parts of the course, I think that's going to be really difficult. So I hope that in the riders' tent, there's a really good bank of television screens. And of course, we will, have people out and about looking for us, but it's not quite the same as being able to get to see an obstacle jumping yourself.
And then, sorry, Dickie, just to jump in on that, one of the things that I think we saw or we've seen at sort of big events in the past is if there's a hold on course, that actually a member of the team gets to that rider as soon as possible, because you don't know how long that hold is going to be. Do you think that is going to affect actually you or Chris or somebody being able to get to the riders, should that be the case? I know you guys like to have a plan for every scenario. Is that something that you've kind of got a contingency plan in place for?
Yeah, that will be difficult. And until we're actually on the ground and seeing how the setup works, it's going to be difficult. So things, for example, they'll probably say if you're a competitor on cross-country day, you need to have your number bib on walking the course. So you're allowed into the fences. But, as staff, we need to make sure we've got access to some sort of accreditation that lets you get onto this course. Horses being held, the first thing is they will have vets on nearly every single fence. And they will have a quick reaction unit, if you want to call it that, at so many different places round the course with ice water and washing off kit, etc. So, and then our understanding is that there will be a buggy service that if you have a horse that's held, you can put the grooms onto the buggy service and they will drive you out to that spot. And of course, if we'll have our electric push bikes there, so we'll get to hopefully to where we need to.
Okay, so what about the rest of the competition? 2 rounds of jumping again on the final day?
Yeah, 2 rounds of jumping. So first track is at 125 up to 15, 16 jumping effort. So it's 125 in height, and that's the team competition. And then when the team competition's over, then you move into the top 25. And there's normally a couple of hours gap into the top 25, and the top 25 will jump a 130 track for the individual competition. But their scores are carried right the way forward to that last round. So hopefully, touch wood, if all goes to plan, we'll have athletes in both parts of that, and the kind of the pressure changes. You've got to keep your focus, because once the team is over, yes, there might be again, hopefully a time to quick celebrate, but then you need to just pause, reset. There's still part of the competition to go. So keeping that focus for the individual as well is really important.
that mindset switch as well for the riders, isn't it? We spoke about it post Tokyo, if they've won team gold and then all of a sudden they've been a part of a team all week and then they're back into their individual mindset and up against each other as each man for himself. Diggy, you've been to this will be your 4th Olympic Games in a role similar to the role that you're in now. What stands out for you?
Oh gosh, I mean, highlights. My first big highlight was obviously the gold medals in London, team and individual gold from Charlotte, team gold medal in dressage. So that was, quite an amazing thing, and that was a big highlight. But I'd always dreamt of that Olympic event in gold. And I've been dreaming of that for about 20 odd years. It was when I was sort of put on a long list, and I did some training with Yogi back in his early days. And I thought, this is the job that I want. And I want to lead a team to get the Olympic gold medal. So the Tokyo for me on a personal level was absolutely monumental and huge. And then also in Tokyo, some of you might be aware and not aware, I sort of had to step into the breach, and I led the jumpers and the dressage team there. And I, rubbed shoulders with the Paralympic teams there as well. So for Tokyo on a personal level as well, to do both jobs was huge. But also to come away with our best medal tally abroad was also quite bonkers. So for me, it would be the Tokyo team event in gold.
We're hoping that Paris might top that in a few weeks' time. Watch this space. Finally, Dickie, obviously, the amount of support from everybody is absolutely incredible. Just how important is it to the athletes, and what impact can it have on the actual overall result as well?
Well, first of all, I'd ask you all to be with us. We have a fantastic team. In every aspect, from the grooms to the home teams behind the athletes and the horses, to their support staff, to their connections, to the owners, to the farrier who comes in at sort of 6 o'clock in the morning to nail a shoe back on that's been lost the day before, or the equine physio. So be with us in this. And then to those who have an interest in the sport, whether you ride or you don't ride, or you're just in love with the sport, but reach out to your friends. And there's the Olympic Games is once every 4 years. Get them to come and follow Team GB, and especially our equestrian eventing team. And it's such an exciting sport. And the cross-country day, as we know, is a sport of 1,000 variables. There's only 3 in a team now, which for everybody watching it adds more jeopardy. For me, as a performance manager, team leader, it's quite painful because it's kind of almost a Monte Carlo bus strategy. Because you haven't got a drop score anymore. But from you guys there sat at home watching, whether you're in Versailles, whether you're watching on live stream or on TV, it is so exciting. So join us, be there with us, support us. And for the riders and the connections, the grooms, the support staff, the owners, it makes such a difference to see you guys backing us, to hear you backing us. And all that support, we can't thank you enough. Be with us.
Absolutely cannot wait. I've got goosebumps there, Dickie. The countdown is officially on. Best of luck over the next few weeks. Thank you for talking to us and for giving us a real insight. And we are all with you. So fingers crossed, and let's go and get the job done.
Thank you.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed that show. My goodness me, jam-packed with so much insight into Paris. Absolutely cannot wait. And the countdown is officially on. So stay tuned. Lots more coming your way over the next few weeks. But for now, let's be with us. Welcome, listeners, to Quickfire Questions with Fairfax and Faber, where we will be putting some quickfire questions, as the name might suggest, to some of the best riders in the business. And today's guest is the Blenheim long format 4-star winner, none other than Yasmin Ingham. Yas, are you ready?
I'm ready.
What is your favourite event?
I would say Blenheim has to be at the top of the list. It's just such an incredible venue and I love how all the crowds come and watch.
What Fairfax and Favour boot would you wear to a trot up?
I think my favourite trot-up boot from Fairfax and Favour has to be the heel mirror. I just think they look so smart, elegant and classy.
What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
Something that stuck with me from day one is what Chris Bartle said to me many years ago, and that's stick to your system.
Yaz, thank you so much. We have loved you answering our quickfire questions with Fairfax and Favour.
Thank you very much for having me.